Hello, welcome to episode 2 of the Wire Electronics Podcast, where we discuss what's happening in your industry. I'm your host, Jalen Barnes. Today's discussion is about mass notification. I want to talk about this because I think it's incredibly relevant. There have been many emergency scenarios in public and private facilities in the last several years. Mass shootings, stabbings, terrorist threats, and more. I think paging and mass notification is incredibly important. And if you're talking about security, this needs to be a part of that conversation. If you are a security installer, you should be offering this too. So to dig into this topic, I brought in an expert, Mr. Jeff.Robertson. Jeff is ex-Navy and has been in low voltage and audio for over 30 years. He worked with Bogan for 7 years as a regional sales manager and is currently national sales manager for Penn Audio USA. He's been doing that for 8 years. So how are you, Jeff?
I am terrific. Thanks for having me on, Jalen.
Hey, not a problem. Now, tell me, did I leave anything out of there for your pedigree? You got a pretty impressive backstory there. Anything I left out?
No, anything else would just make me older.
Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough. We can work with that. All right. So let's hop right into this. Straight off the bat, what does the term mass notification mean?
Well, that's a great question, actually, Jalen. Mass notification has been around quite some time. It became an in vogue terminology shortly after the Virginia Tech shooting many years ago. And it's also one of the misused nomers out there that we find out in the industry. Mass notification is just a way, it's exactly what it sounds. It's a way to alert a mass or the masses or a bunch of people, whether they're workers, faculty, students, parents, combinations thereof with schools, manufacturing, distribution, or even to take it even a larger sense, a community, city, state, or even, all the military, whatever. And it doesn't encompass any one single vertical or industry. It's always involved notifying people via medias like SMS texting, via emails, robocalling through the phones, and actually some of the more recent ones is actually doing software on servers where it'll actually whoever's logged onto the server doing work will pop up a window telling them what they should do or whatever. It also includes digital signage for those hard of hearing as well. And in more recent years, with all the security concerns, the audio paging industry has become a part of this as well. So mass notification is really the combination of all of those medias together to be able to send out a message or directions or alerts to a bunch of different people via different methods or media.
Okay. So when I always thought of mass notification, I used to always associate with audio paging. But if I'm hearing you right, audio paging is more recent aspect that's been added on with mass notification.
That is correct. And audio paging has always been exactly what we all know it as. It's a building and or facility, campus, whatever, a way to be able just to talk live, send live messages out to the people that are there within the coverage area. Most paging has always been thought of as just how they conduct their day-to-day business, whether you're in manufacturing and you're paging for personnel to go somewhere or to do something, or if you're in a K-12 school environment, it's you have your bells, your messages, your what do you call the messages in the morning or their
Mm-hmm.
announcements in the morning and their bell schedules and stuff like that. The emergency part has just become a concern over probably the last decade and even in recent years, more in tune. And that's always been kind of held by the fire alarm industry. They've always kind of held, they've had the whole mass notification as far as the local paging within their media or their scope or sphere of influence.
Okay. So let's dig into that then. What are the current trends now when it comes to paging, when it comes to SMS, and every different way, every different vertical you could use when it comes to mass notification? What's going on right now? What do you see?
Okay, what we do in paging, and historically, it's always involved whether they were using a microphone, whether they were using telephone to do their pages throughout their facility. It could be all page or it could be zone paging. When you start bringing in mass notification, and I have air quotes going on here, like life
Mhm.
safety is always the term that people throw out there when you're talking about mass notification, i.e., emergency paging or emergency communications. Then that brings in a whole plethora of issues. And this is where the fire alarm industry and the security industry has kind of held this within their sphere,
Mhm.
is that when you're talking life safety, you have to have supervised speakers. You have to have supervised amplification. You have to have supervised controllers, which the fire alarm industry has been doing for many, many decades. So they've always held that. But now, since with all the security concerns, everything from bomb threats to severe weather to active shooters to shelter in places, run, fight,
Mhm.
hide conditions, they figured out really quickly that most end users inside of a high rise or a big manufacturing plant or industrial plant or a government type of complex, they may have a voice command center for the fire alarm, but nobody knows how to use it. It's the fire
Mhm.
chief is the one that uses that. And there might be a security personnel or one or two, building maintenance or security personnel that knows about it. But typically it's in a closet or in a lobby, locked up in a cabinet with a bunch of bells, whistles, buttons, and it's very scary
Yeah.
looking. So if there's a severe weather indication or an active shooter or a shelter in place
Mhm.
type of thing, the end user doesn't know how to use that equipment.
Mhm.
So NFPA and UL with mass notification, UL 2572, has realized many years ago that they need to be able to use an emergency or mass notification system in a lot more instances than just a fire condition.
Yeah.
And they've also realized that manual transmission of these messages and live alerts should take precedence over any automated messaging, such as you would get with a fire alarm
Mhm.
situation. And that was a huge step. So the minute they did that, they acknowledged we need to utilize paging systems, which, by the way, are with higher end speakers. Us as audio people, we do even coverage, we do intelligibility. We have higher end speakers that sound better because they use background music or foreground music in them as
Mhm.
well. So now all we have to do is make sure, how do we supervise these to meet the life safety, and also how do we provide backup amplifiers, and we supervise amplification, and we supervise paging devices, and we interface them into telco, and we interface them into emergency systems such as fire, security, CCTV, controlled access, all of those as well. Those are the big concerns that bring the paging system into mass notification.
Gotcha. So let me ask you this from the perspective of Pit and Audio. If someone has some audio paging already in place, if you're looking at a school, a manufacturing plant, whatever, and they've got that there, not for security purposes, but just because they want to do the bell schedules and all that. What does Pit have? And is this the industry standard? Can you integrate with what they already have? Do you have to kind of start from scratch? Is it too late if they already? How does that work?
Absolutely. The one thing that Penton does that's very unique is Penton is a global company. Penton Audio has offices all through Europe, Asia, Russia, the Middle East, and also here in Rhode Island. We control from Canada down to South America. And they come from a security background. They cut their teeth many decades ago in mass notification in the transportation industry. So a lot of the major rail lines you see in Europe,
Mhm.
Singapore, Malaysia, Taiwan, are also running on our messaging, audio paging, and alert systems, and they've been doing that for many decades. So all of the things that we design come with a security background. They have onboard storage, audio storage for messages. They have built-in logic IOs. They have schedulers built in to even our low-end, inexpensive devices, and they can be fiber linked. They can be distributed through copper. They can be streaming audio over across, TCP/IP networks. So because of that, we can easily retrofit with any existing paging system, no matter how basic or how involved it is. Some of the stuff we did is like the U.S. Capitol Hill, where we interfaced and replaced some IED equipment many years ago. So interfacing just involves usually adding control equipment in the middle of what they already have. We do not need to replace amplifiers. We don't need to rewire or replace any of your 25 or 70-volt speakers. All we do is we add certain control equipment in the middle of that signal chain to give you all of those mass notifications and security and supervision features that you would expect, or you would actually have to have by code for a lot of mass notification applications.
Gotcha. So let's dig even further into that. What is Pitton doing right now to address these modern day concerns? To talk to me about a little bit about the product line and what we're looking at as soon
Sure.
as I go and make a decision to do something right
Awesome. Yeah, we're going deep down the rabbit hole now, Jalen.
now.
So what we do is, aside from any of the audio processing or control equipment, which I mentioned earlier, we can easily insert into any existing paging system. These control type of systems will provide supervision for speaker circuits. They will provide supervision for amplifiers. They will provide automatic backup amplifier switchover if required. They will supervise zone paging or microphone paging stations if you add those. It's also SIP compatible, which is another industry trend for the paging market that has increased exponentially over the last few years. So we can actually do zone paging direct from your customer's VoIP system, as well as we can tie it into their analog telco via analog station or CO lines.
So analog or IP can make the thing work.
Yeah, either one.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Or both. I have some of them that actually have the analog as a backup to the VoIP system because they
Okay.
use a cloud service. So they just wanted to back up. So either
Mhm.
or both. And so that takes care of your live paging within the facility. So
Mhm.
now you go, well, how do we address the wide area alerts? Well, one of the things we do, if you take a college campus, for instance, or if you use a military base or any kind of wide area like the U.S. Capitol Hill complex, then you need to be able to do wide area alerts outside of the buildings, not just the speakers and horns inside the facility. So other than standard paging horns, which hopefully most of your customers, are very familiar with, and I'm sure Norfolk Wire sells pallet loads of them,
Mhm.
that we have also we call our clear voice, which are planar array type of speakers that provide intelligibility over long distances and yet are not loud like all the other things you would see like LRAD or hyperspike, that they're just crazy loud to get further. We actually do intelligibility for further distances and cut through high ambient noise areas. Think of manufacturing, industrial, or aircraft hangar type of environments. So that's for wide area alert.
Mhm.
And also that how do we get out to the masses that may not be on campus, but we want to make sure they know what's going on and do not
Yeah.
come onto campus into a dangerous situation. So then we also have what we call in our own, it's called a Terra alert, TERRA dash alert. And that's how we are able to send messages out to SMS text. We can do live cell phone or mobile device calls or phone calls. We can also send emails to recipients or groups of recipients, and you could group them like faculty, staff, maybe your code stat doctors, your security staff, your admin, teachers, parents, or whatever. While we don't necessarily target the large enterprise server, very, very expensive enterprise server type applications like you would see with a large university or maybe a large school district where they want to send a message out that we're going to, that schools are going to close at 1 p.m. today
Mhm.
because of snow or whatever. We typically target a school building or facility by itself to where they can actually alert their local people, their local students or staff of something going on there within their facility or their grounds, not necessarily a district wide. We can do
Okay.
district wide, but that's a whole nother level that kind of surpasses or exceeds what mass notification and security is for.
Gotcha.
Um, so that's how, and we wrap all of that in together. And even with the mobile device that makes us unique, is you can have authorized users with any mobile device, Android, Apple iPhone, iPads, whatever, and they are authorized people with a login that they can actually do text to speech, or just like you're recording a voicemail greeting or message on your phone,
Okay.
live speak a message and actually have that transmitted via cell or over the internet into the paging system. So if you're a nice example is if you've done an evac for a factory for a chemical spill like ammonia or chlorine and
Mhm.
everybody's out, well, you can actually do further instructions outside of the building via your mobile device to tell people, hey, move to this muster area or move upwind to this area,
Mhm.
or it's all clear, we can go back in. Which is we see with manufacturing, that's a huge concern with them, and they utilize that mobile access as well. So it's not just getting alert messages, also being able to use your mobile device to actually transmit and or connect to the paging system with your mobile device without having to go to an inside microphone or a telco system inside of the building where you're standing outside of and don't want to go back in. So
Mhm.
that's how we do all of that, and we tie those in. And all of these that I mentioned can be tied into any existing standard paging system by any of the plethora of manufacturers out there.
Gotcha. So if we're dealing with maybe a small school and they've already got a system in place for their basic announcement and bell schedule or anything like that, can what Penton offers come and kind of take over and handle that as well as the mass notification for emergency situations and just handle all of it together?
Correct. And here's another instance with this is there's a lot of facilities, higher education such as university
Mhm.
campuses or community colleges are one good example, as well as say high-rise applications in office buildings or large industrial manufacturing. They normally don't have paging systems installed.
Mhm.
A class, a Div 1 or Class 1A college university is not going to have paging systems or intercom systems in their classrooms, not like a typical K-12 school would do.
Mhm.
But after all the recent security issues, it's become real apparent that they have no
Mhm.
way to let people know on campus what's going on other than SMS text
Yeah.
and doing emails. And all of that's a cloud-based service. There's several cloud-based services out there. There's Everbridge, there's Rave Mobile, whatever. They subscriber services. They pass those fees on to the students and the faculty as part of their tuition.
Mhm.
So and they realized real quickly, Virginia Tech being a main one, I'm a old UVA grad myself, that when something happens, they had no way to let people know that we're actually in a classroom with their phones off and not doing emails because they're
Yeah.
learning, to let them
Mhm.
know what was going on.
Mhm.
So one of the big trends is all of these high rises and manufacturing and or office and higher education realized we need to have a way to alert people on my campus what's going on. And a lot of times it's not even security, it's just severe weather. Where I'm down here in the south, and tornadoes are just a fact of life from late winter straight on through midsummer.
Mhm.
So they have to have a way to let people know that are outside, get inside, go to your shelter or shelter in place, or seek wherever their emergency response codes or procedures are. So that has been a big trend where they actually have to add these features to what they're already doing with SMS text and emails. So paging becomes a big concern almost overnight.
Understood. So if I'm an owner facility, or I'm the person in charge of security, and I'm hearing this and I think, man, I gotta do something. I've got something in place, but it's not gonna fit the bill. I have nothing in place. I need to get something in place. What's my first step? What should I expect? Should I call you? That my first step?
Well, I would tell them to call you, and then you could call me.
Yeah, gotcha, gotcha.
Yes, and we'll help them through that. We have free design service, and depending on facility and locations, a lot of times between me or the other sales managers, we can hop over and take a survey or meet with the customer. We have dealers. We deal with regional distribution. Norfolk Wire is one of our favorite partners. You guys do a great job with us, and we appreciate that. So yes, we will take you by the hand and we'll step you through the whole thing. And a lot of times to find out what you don't need, or there might be other things. If there's another product out there that we think fits a certain application or part of it, we'll be the first ones to tell you.
Gotcha. That's perfect. So before we close out here, anything we've left out, anything that's just $1 million item that you think that we need to know about?
Well, I guess the biggest trend now is, or the $1 million item that you're referring to is, I don't care how small, it could be one microphone, a small 15-watt amplifier, and a couple of horns in your warehouse. If you want to do messaging or whatever, we can easily, for very little money, add on to that. Or if you've got the largest convention center or airport or distribution facility, whatever, give us a holler. We can tell you what we can do. And a lot of times they can pass these expenses on to insurance, or
Mhm.
save the expenses or offset them with insurance savings by adding mass notification and emergency alert to their existing system. So any of the end users or dealers that deal with large end user accounts that you have them talk to them and discuss this. If you are selling a paging system, you know, don't stop there. You'll leave a lot of money on the table if you're not talking to them about how important is this paging system. Do you need onboard messaging for emergency alerts and emergency conditions, or maybe just schedule tones and bells and alerts? If you have manufacturing and a line jams up or whatever, we can easily take logic controls or triggers to trigger messages and send them out to other zones. We can do it over the network or wired or fiber. There's tons of ways. Don't get a myopic view and back yourself into a corner and leave money on the table because you don't even bring these up to your end user. A lot of times, a simple paging system can be a very involved, supervised mass notification system just by asking the right questions to your customers.
Understood. That's awesome. Well, I appreciate all of that, Jeff. That's incredibly educational and once again relevant. I feel like this is something that every installer needs to know about and be digging into and learning more about. 'Cause I just think it's completely relevant. It's perfect for the age that we live in right now. You just got to know this and you got to be involved in this.
Right, and the biggest trend now, Jalen, is just IP. We have a
Yeah.
full range of IP speakers. We can encode, decode, stream, IGMP, SIP, page, messaging, scheduling, all that stuff, even just all over IP. So schools are moving more into full-blown IP intercom systems, and getting away from the old legacy systems by the handful of people that have done that. Also, when you get into the full-blown supervision and messaging, mass notification type of systems, like we do with our big IDA8 systems that are UL 2572 listed for that, there are very few players in that market, and most of the players they're so complex that they have protected dealers with territories. The average person can't go out and bid a project using those equipment, so they're handcuffed. Whether you're an end user and you're building a facility, whatever, you're handcuffed by whatever manufacturers out there. We, on the other hand, work with regional distributors such as Norfolk Wire in working with the people and training them. So we do not narrow or secure areas in with dealers. We will train and help out end users, our regional distributors, and also contractors or installers to put these systems in. So it opens up a lot of market that before now was totally closed off to a lot of your customers.
Got it. Understood. And that's what I've liked about dealing with you and dealing with Pittston is the accessibility and the ability to ask a question, get it answered. And because this can be daunting to someone who is not aware of it and doesn't know all the ins and outs. So you want to feel like you've got someone available to you who can help you. So to everyone who's subscribed to this podcast, you can reach out to me. You can reach out to Jeff. Our contact information is going to be with this podcast in the description and also in the email that I send out. And if you've got questions, if you want to see demonstrations and things like that, I'll be more than happy to set that up for you and make something happen. But yeah, just reach out. We'll be more than happy to help you.
Absolutely. And if they reference this podcast when they give me a call, I might sweeten the pot and give them a little discount on it. Just make sure they mention it, and I'll know that it was coming through this podcast and Norfolk Wire, and we'll protect the chain.
Sounds good to me. Hear that, people? There you go. There you go. All right. Anything else? I don't want to leave anything out that could just change the game for somebody. Anything else?
The only thing I can say is unfortunate as I guess current times are with security, and a lot of this is because of just media that we know about everything that happens in every nook and cranny of the world immediately, and then they talk about it for many days.
Exactly.
But when you see something like Parkland, or Sandy Hook or Virginia Tech or any of these, you can bet that the very next day, like say Parkland, for instance, the very next day, school districts across this country were meeting with their safety people. They were meeting with their local sheriff's department or local law enforcement, and their superintendents were meeting to going, if that happened in my district or one of my schools, what could we have done? What could we have done differently, or how would we have addressed it? I can guarantee you that happens every time a major incident happens in whatever vertical market. And when they do that, they all realize quickly, local alerts, local direction, SMS text, emailing, all of that stuff, wide area alerts, and tying it into local law enforcement or security or emergency response personnel becomes critical. And that's when, if you're in those areas, you almost overnight start getting phone calls for say, hey, can you come look at my system? That's directly what drives that need. It is, as unfortunate as it is, this is also how the industry evolves and how end users learn to protect their workers and students and faculty. So every one of these incidents, they learn something more. So just keep that in mind. And every time you see this, think to yourself, what could we have done? Because as a manufacturer and working in this industry, we do the same thing. We look at it and we go, what do we have that could have helped or could have sped this up or could maybe save something? And sometimes there's nothing you can do. And other times we go, man, if they only had this, it would have helped whatever, so we're doing the same thing.
Yeah. So to the facilities, end users, schools, universities out there listening to this podcast, you don't want to be caught on the wrong end of it. You want to be proactive. And everybody who's been involved in a situation like this, as you're looking at what we could have done differently, what we could have had and everything, like Jeff said, sometimes there's nothing you could have done, but you want to know that we had everything in place that we could have had that could save lives, that can make the difference in a split second. So this is not something you want to ignore. This is not something you want to put off. You want to call somebody up like me. You want to call somebody up like Jeff and just find out what the cost is. Don't assume it's too expensive. It's going to cost too much. It's not in the budget. There's a way. I know there's a way to make something work with what you got. So please look into it because it's vitally important.
That's well said, Jalen. The other thing about it, remember, Penton Audio, we're
Mm,
global, and we've been doing this for many decades, and we come from a security background. And
mm,
because we're global, we get also a lot of experience from our, the UK,
yeah.
the Rotterdam, the UAE offices, our Taiwan offices, our Moscow offices. We get feedback, and we develop equipment that meets a lot of security and notification and paging needs, throughout the world. So, you're also getting a lot of experience globally when you talk to
Mm,
people. And when you talk to us, like we'll steer you through it. The key thing is, what are your needs? And then we feed off of that, and we try to recommend the best product and or system to meet your needs.
that's awesome. Well, I appreciate you coming on with me, Jeff. I feel like this is a very valuable podcast and very valuable information that we put out there. And really hope that a lot of people get a hold of this, and it really makes a difference for some people.
No, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me on, Jalen.
So thank you everyone for listening to today's podcast. I encourage you to share it. The more listeners I have, the more suggestions I can receive to cover relevant topics. If you're subscribed to my mailing list, I've included some information on the Penton products Jeff and I discussed. If you have any questions about these products or about this discussion, give me a call or give Jeff a call or email us. I'll have that information in the email and in the description of this podcast. If you're not subscribed to the mailing list that I send this podcast out on, email me at jalen.barnes@norfolkwire.com to receive every podcast I produce every week by email. I'll close out today's podcast with an inspirational quote from Abraham Lincoln. Whatever you are, be a good one. Thank you so much again for listening. Give me your feedback. Be blessed. And I'll be back next week to tell you more about what's happening in your industry. Thank you all.